An LLC bought our home and shoved a notice to quit. I discovered our lease vanished, leaving my disabled mother stranded. Okay, so this happened with zero warning. No knock, no envelope, no amount listed. My hands went cold, right? I mean, who does that? And here's where it gets worse. I called town hall, and the clerk pulled the deed. Ownership changed on October 6. She told me registered service is required, not mystery papers in a door. The form didn't match the state's notice to quit. Coffee stains marked the page. The LLC wanted weekly rent with no amount, and a quit date scribbled for the end of November. I walked into the housing clerk's window and held up the paper. She glanced at it and winced. That isn't the state form. Her voice went careful. Service must be by Marshall. I leaned closer. So this doesn't count. She tapped the heading. Posting isn't proper initial service. My throat tightened. Then what do we do? She lowered her tone. Until you're served, don't move. I went home, opened the court site, and searched our address. And that's when it happened. There it was. A summary process case filed already. Return date, the last Tuesday of November. 23 calls to the LLC, no answer. Our receipt shows rent through October 31st. Connecticut law gives 10 days on month to month. Their notice was dated October 10th. The math didn't even line up. At this point, I'm done. The legal aid attorney leaned over his keyboard. Eyes steady. One default and a marshal shows up. He looked right at me. Your mother could be locked out in 2 weeks if you miss dates. Heat rose in my chest. But we can pay rent. He nodded once. It won't matter without a stay. His voice went firmer. You need to file an appearance, request ADA accommodation, and demand proper service. I dialed every hotline on the list. Busy signal, voicemail. A receptionist told me they don't give legal advice. The marshal unit said they can't talk until a job's assigned. The court clerk repeated that they're not lawyers. I just stood there, thinking, if the system won't help, what now? Part of me wanted to pack everything that night. Part of me wanted to fight to the last hearing. I grabbed our rent receipts and the notice. Then, I drove to our old landlord's shop, hoping he'd fix this. The bell chimed and he stepped out from the back room. I laid the door notice on the counter and kept my voice even. They're trying to evict us. He frowned at the header. They bought it fast. I held up the October receipt. You wrote, we're rented through October. He stared at the ink. I did. His voice went thin. They promised they'd work with you. I swallowed hard. Put that in writing. He rubbed his temples. I can confirm rent through October. He reached for a pad, but I don't control them now. My jaw locked. Then at least email them while I'm here. He pulled his phone out. I'll send it. I watched his thumbs move. Subject line says confirmation of rent through October. I muttered. He glanced up. Got it. He pressed send and slid me a copy of his note. I walked out with the paper and wondered if that would matter at all. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why not just pay the weekly rent they scribbled? Keep the peace. Stay quiet. The problem is, they didn't list an amount. They didn't list a mailing address I trust, and they already filed in court. Paying blind could mess us up. And then, everything changed. The next morning, another notice. Same logo, different tone. Immediate weekly rent required, plus a bank routing number. I texted the number. Our landlord said belonged to them. Nothing. I emailed the address on the notice. Bounce back. I looked at my mom's walker, then at the stairs, and my stomach twisted. I printed the state's real notice to quit form for comparison. I highlighted the parts theirs, missed. Then I drove to the courthouse to file our appearance and an ADA accommodation request for my mother. I filled out the forms, my leg bouncing so hard the pen shook. The clerk looked at the paperwork pile and pointed at a drop box. Put ADA requests here. I slid the envelope in and exhaled slowly. A volunteer from the Tenant help desk waved me over. What's your timeline? I laid out the dates. Rent through October. Notice dated October 10th. Case return last Tuesday of November. He nodded while scanning. Request a reasonable extension. He tapped a template. 2 months. I raised an eyebrow. 2 months. His voice went calm. Her disability might justify it. I called the eviction hotline from the lobby. We have 3 occupants, I said into the phone. Mom's disabled. LLC left the notice. The counselor's voice softened. And they only named one of you? I confirmed. Only me. Okay, she replied. That's defective service if they never marshal served the others. I held my breath. So we're okay. Her words came measured. You're safer. Not safe. That night, I knocked on our neighbor's door. He opened it in a faded hoodie, eyes wide. They slide a paper into yours too? I lifted the notice. Who delivered it? He leaned on the frame. Guy in a baseball cap, didn't knock. I pressed. Marshall. He shook his head. No badge, no papers in hand. My shoulders dropped a little. Thank you. He looked past me at our porch. You moving? I glanced at our boxes. I hope not. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to bargain. I pulled up the ADA request template again and added detail about my mom's mobility. Her need for ramps, her doctor's letter. I attached the letter and scanned it in. By Monday morning, the court emailed a scheduling notice and a warning about deadlines. My stomach twisted so hard I leaned over the sink. Okay, deep breath. File everything on time. Now, I know what you're thinking. Just move, avoid the fight, save your energy. I wish it worked like that. The marshal knocked at noon with proper papers and a stern look. I unlatched the door and braced myself. He checked the address, then read my name out loud. This is Service. I held the door wider. Are the others listed? He glanced at his packet. Only you. I've filed an ADA request for my mother. His tone shifted. Note it with the court. Do not ignore anything. He held my eyes. He slid the summons across. Signature acknowledges receipt. Not guilt. I scribbled my name, hand shaking. What about the fake weekly demand with no amount? His voice went flat. Ignore it. Pay monthly as before, but into escrow. Where do I set that up? He pointed at the clerk's office. Ask for a rent escrow packet. And this is where everything fell apart. I opened our security deposit folder and realized the transfer never happened. 13 years, and the interest records were missing. I grabbed my phone and called our old landlord again. He answered on the third ring. Did you transfer our deposit with interest to the new owner? Silence. Then a cough. They waived it in the price. My jaw clenched. That's not how that works. He muttered that he'd send a letter acknowledging the balance due, today. My voice shook. He agreed, then hung up without goodbye. I marched back to the courthouse and requested the escrow packet. The clerk pulled a thin bundle from a drawer. I filled the form, opened a separate account, and deposited November's rent. I printed the receipt and attached it to our file. The tenant help desk volunteer looked relieved. That protects you from non-payment claims right now. What about termination for possession only? He rubbed his chin. Then we argue retaliation and accommodation. The pretrial date landed 2 weeks out. We had 14 days to breathe and prepare. I gathered photos of the rails, the narrow hallway, the stair rise. I scanned Mom's doctor letter and highlighted the mobility restrictions. Legal aid squeezed me into a clinic slot that afternoon. The attorney reviewed our file and tapped the notice. You've got multiple defenses here. I leaned in. Walk me through them. Improper initial service, defective notice form, and escrowed rent. He lifted a finger. Plus, no deposit transfer with interest. What's the plan? He outlined motions for stay and accommodation and a request for dismissal. Serve them through the marshal to be safe. I nodded hard. We can do that. On the way home, a white pickup blocked our driveway. 2 men unloaded signs and a lockbox. I stepped out and raised my palm. Who are you with? The taller guy shrugged. Maintenance. There's an active case. No entry without notice. He smirked and lifted a drill. My voice went sharp. Touch that door and I call 911. The shorter one looked away. We got orders. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. That did it. They tossed the box back and rolled off. My hand shook for a full minute. I filmed everything and emailed it to the attorney. He called within 10 minutes. That's an attempted illegal lockout. Should I get a restraining order? His voice tightened. File a motion for immediate order to show cause. Tomorrow morning. First thing. That night, the LLC finally called from a blocked number. I hit speaker and set the phone on the counter. A man's voice came clipped. You must vacate by month end. We have an active case and an ADA request, he chuckled. Courts move slow. I move fast. My voice went steady. Put everything in writing to the court. We'll see you at pretrial. He tried another angle. Pay weekly immediately or face fees. You listed no amount and no address. His temper bled through. You'll regret this. I ended the call and took another breath. The envelope was already open when the mail arrived. Inside was a letter demanding access for inspection tomorrow morning. I circled the statute they cited and compared it to our notice. It required reasonable notice and mutual scheduling. I emailed a polite response proposing 2 options next week. No reply. No confirmation, just silence. Morning came with a pounding at the door. I checked the peephole and held my breath. Same 2 men, plus a third with a clipboard. I cracked the chain lock and kept my voice calm. We offered 2 times next week. Clipboard guy lifted his chin. Order from owner, entering now. No entry without proper notice and accommodation. The taller one shoved the door and the chain snapped off. My heart raced as they pushed inside. Mom startled in her chair and gripped the armrests. You can't do this. Clipboard guy waved a paper. Inspection for marketing purposes. I snapped a photo and dialed 911. Polis and a copy to the judge. The shorter one muttered curses and backed into the hallway. The officers arrived faster than I expected. One officer stepped between us and held up his palm. Everyone stops. Who lives here? I pointed to Mom and then myself. The officer turned to the men. Do you have lawful entry documentation? Clipboard guy faltered. Notice was left yesterday. The officer's voice cooled. That's not lawful entry. He gestured at the door. Fix the chain. Leave the property. They shuffled backward and vanished toward the truck. The officer took notes, then looked at me. File that emergency motion today. Already drafting it. He nodded once. Document every contact going forward. I posted the footage and photos to a shared drive. Then I walked Mom through the plan for court. The door knocked again, harder, and everything inside me froze. I checked the peephole and saw a uniform and a badge. My shoulders loosened a notch. It was code enforcement following the police report. They photographed the broken chain and took statements. I printed copies for court and kept moving. By late morning, our emergency motion landed on the judge's docket. We logged into the remote session and waited. My leg bounced under the table. The clerk called the case number and parties. An attorney appeared for the LLC, sharp and impatient. He opened with a push for immediate possession. The judge lifted a hand and stopped him. Her tone went calm and deadly clear. Counsel, I reviewed the filings. She looked straight into the camera. Your notice isn't the state form. Service on only one occupant is defective. The LLC attorney tried to pivot to non-payment. Rent is escrowed with the court. My voice stayed steady. We deposited November rent yesterday. His audio crackled. Weekly rent is required by ownership change. The judge narrowed her eyes. Ownership change doesn't rewrite statutes. Inspections for marketing require consent and notice. Attempt a lockout again, and I sanction you. I could breathe again. She issued a temporary order barring entries without written scheduling. She also granted an accommodation for extra time, 2 months to relocate, subject to compliance. The attorney asked to be heard on possession. Denied for now. We ended the call, and I finally exhaled now. I know what you're thinking. Buy time isn't the same as winning. Right, I get it. Pretrial could still flip the board, so I kept collecting proof. I photographed repairs we requested for years. I compiled texts with the old landlord confirming October rent. I built a timeline with every contact. The mediator emailed to set pretrial next week. We logged in on time and waited. A housing specialist opened with ground rules. We're here to discuss settlement options. The LLC attorney pressed for a stipulated move-out. 30 days, no money, case closed. My jaw tightened. We have an 80 accommodation. We need 60 days and relocation costs. The specialist looked between squares on the screen. Can either side bend? The attorney adjusted his tie. 2 weeks, $500. I glanced at Mom, her hands trembling. Not enough. We need 2 months and $2,000. He laughed without sound. Absolutely not. My voice stayed even. Then we go to trial. The specialist paused and typed notes. Consider your exposure on the lockout attempt. Silence filled the session window. 4 weeks and $1,000 for relocation. I met eyes with Mom. 6 weeks and $1,500. The attorney rubbed his forehead. Done. Contingent on dismissal, without prejudice. My chest loosened just a little. We put it in writing with dates and payment method. The judge reviewed it later that afternoon. She asked 2 questions and signed. Do you both understand the terms? Yes, and the 8 accommodation remains. Correct. And enforcement requires notice. We walked out of the session shaky but standing. Now came the impossible part. Finding accessible housing in 6 weeks. I started calling every list I had. Housing authority wait lists stretched for years. Church groups offered food but no ramps. A homebuyer counselor finally returned my message. We have a program for first-timers. Our credit isn't perfect. We look at payment history and stability. 13 years. Never late. Send bank statements and the escrow receipt. I uploaded documents and crossed my fingers. 2 days later, she called with news. Approval for a small condo. Accessible entrance. Ground floor, wide hallways, no steps. Can we close in 6 weeks? If inspections pass, yes. My hands just started shaking again. Not fear this time. Hope, maybe. We toured the condo that Friday. Mom gripped my arm and moved slow. She touched the rail and nodded. Her eyes got glossy and tired. I signed the offer paperwork with trembling fingers. The agent warned the seller liked quick timelines. I explained our accommodation order and schedule. They accepted with a closing window inside our 6 weeks. The relocation check arrived from the LLC by courier. I copied it and deposited funds for movers. We booked a company with a ramp truck. We packed every night and labeled boxes. I kept rent escrow current through move out. The old landlord mailed the deposit with interest. He included an apology that read tired. I cashed it and paid for grab bars. Move day came faster than it should have. The movers arrived at 8 in the morning. Where do you want the chair? Front door for now. We'll load last so Mom can sit. Thank you for that. We got everything out by afternoon. I did one last walk through the rooms. The window latch stuck halfway up. I closed it and locked the front door. We handed over keys at the courthouse drop. The clerk stamped our stipulation satisfied. We drove straight to the condo for the walkthrough. The agent met us with a small smile. Ready to see your place? More than ready. We rolled inside and checked doors and outlets. The inspector flagged a minor sink leak. The seller fixed it the next morning. Closing took 1 long hour. I initialed stacks and signed the deed. Mom pressed her palm over the table. Her eyes were wet, but steady. The agent slid the keys across to me. One key had a blue tag. Something unclenched inside my chest. We drove home to a place that was ours. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. No pounding at the door, no mystery papers shoved through the frame, just quiet and the hum of a fridge. Pre-trial compliance check came 2 weeks after closing. We filed proof of move and payment receipt. The judge marked the case, dismissed per agreement. She reminded counsel about sanctions for future lockouts. You understand me, counsel? Yes, Your Honor. I carried Mom's chair into our living room. She finally smiled. So yeah, that is my story.